Got it.
Got it. Welcome to Window Gazing, the podcast where two TikTokers try to say on the same subject. Today we are talking about trashy dating shows, and we just recently discovered our mutual love of trashy dating shows. So my favorite trashy dating shows, the ones that I'm like currently watching, are Love is Blind. That's my favorite one.
Yeah, I think that's the one
Uh
that is the most insane, and we could talk a lot about that one on its own.
yes. And a close second would be Perfect Match on MTV, which is really kind of a co-opted show from MTV's show Are You the One? So I really like that. I hope they do a second season. And then right now I'm watching The Ultimatum. I just made it through The Ultimatum yesterday. So yeah, I just thought this would be a fascinating topic to talk about because it says a lot about where we are with dating and psychology and relationships and everything. So
Yeah, the other one I'll just throw in my curveball on that list is because I don't know that MTV one, but we just started getting into Temptation Island on a recommendation from a
I
coworker.
was I was gonna ask you if you watched Temptation Island when it
Yeah.
first came out. I know
So
they have a
not
new
when it
one.
first came out. Yeah, like 20 years ago. No, I didn't watch the original iteration, but I watched the sort of first season of the reboot, and then we immediately jumped to the latest season, and we finished that a few
Ah,
weeks
I
ago.
gotta I gotta watch that reboot because I used to watch it in like 2001 with my parents when it first came out. And I was like 11 or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, remind me the design of Temptation Island.
Okay, so this is equally absurd in terms of like the assumptions about dating and marriage. So the whole premise is men and women in couples go to this island, which is really just like usually a resort that they pay for in Hawaii or something. And they get separated. They sort of have their little hash out, and it's like, why are we here? Why are we doing this ridiculous TV experiment? And then they split up, and they end up getting thrown into these I guess they call them residences or something, or villas. And in these villas are like sexy single ladies or men, and like the ladies or men are really trying to like get the people in committed relationships interested in them to try to break up their relationships. But it's really just to stay on the show longer. Like this is the perverse incentive to the show, and then the idea is they come back at the end of the show. They have to decide whether or not they're going to leave the island with their original partner, leave the island with a new love interest, or leave by themselves. And it really does destroy relationships. It's like a relationship bulldozer. It's pretty amazing.
That's a little bit how I didn't remember that design at all. That's a little bit how the ultimatum works. Is
Well,
like,
it's kind of, yeah. The ultimatum is as soon as I saw Temptation Island, I was like, the ultimatum is 100% a ripoff of that show. Like it's
yeah,
it's like a little more interesting, but it's just because it's like focused on the idea of like get married or else kind of thing. And I think it's intriguing instead of having these random singles who are clearly trying to like stay on TV by hitting on people they might not otherwise be interested in, and it's actually like the other couples. It's like a little wife swappy action going on. So yeah, it's they each have their own flavors.
that's one thing that I like and dislike about the ultimatum. As I initially complained to my friend Sarah, who was like, "Watch the ultimatum," I was like, "Well, this isn't dumb. They make them switch with all the other couples. There's not going to be anybody within a 5-person dating pool that they're actually compatible with. They got to bring in like 50 more people."
Yeah.
So that's my grudge about it. But I guess the show is not, in fact, to introduce you to somebody you actually might want to date. It's to make you grateful for your other partner.
But
It was also
sometimes, or sorry, go ahead.
kind of fascinating because on the ultimatum you obviously have uh an insecurely attached couple usually, and you have an anxious partner and an avoidant partner, and the avoidant partner is always the one that doesn't want to get married. And so when they split everybody up, I was like, okay, the anxious people are going to pair back up with other avoidant people. Didn't happen that way. the anxious partners paired together and the avoidant partners paired together. And I thought that was fascinating because the avoidant partners were just like, you suck, you have no socials. Like, it was just so funny. They were just like mirrors for each other of what they're doing in their own relationships.
But at the same time, the hilarious thing with the ultimatum is sometimes the non-committal partners will suddenly be like, this person has changed. Like, I could totally imagine living my life with this random stranger that I just met on this show. Like, it's after basically saying like they would never get married to their original partners. Have you seen the queer ultimatum?
I
Like
have seen
the
a couple episodes, but I haven't watched that season all the way through.
That's by far the best iteration. They should just can the straight version and stick with the gay lesbian version because the dynamics of those relationships are much more involved and emotionally complex and interesting.
The
I couldn't
math
speak to
works
any of the
out better too.
characters.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally, totally. The math works perfectly.
I will say on two of the seasons of the ultimatum that I'm somewhat familiar with, the gay season and the most recent season, there's a lot of narcissists in that dating pool. I don't know why that seems to attract narcissism, but way higher rates than in the other shows that I've seen. Like, you don't find a lot of narcissists like on The Bachelor. And the way that I identify narcissism is just like, do you have someone who completely invalidates somebody else's feelings in the relationship and says that they're the logical one, and the other person is completely illogical? That's usually how I can identify it. Anyway, our last episode was on narcissism, so I think I'm on that episode still. But yeah, so yeah, I just got done with the ultimatum. What do you think of Love is Blind, like the most recent season?
uh, the show is so in some ways it was like the best season but also like the worst, like, which is I realize a vague thing to say, but
Not that many
um
couples ended up
no,
coming
not
out
that
of
many
it.
couples. A lot of like, as a friend of mine at work said, he thought that the pod period was much more emotionally involved, right? Like usually they skip over the opening pod conversations to get right to the spicy parts, which are the fact that they basically entrap them. And we should acknowledge that the show has been accused of abusing its contestants by essentially forcing them at pain of loss of tens of thousands of dollars to remain on the show to the bitter end, despite the fact that they're like held hostage sometimes.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. It's I think I can't remember. I think it might have been Forbes or one of those online magazines that basically did a whole expose, just basically interviewing contestants. I think from the season before this one, essentially, or maybe 2 seasons ago, showing that the contestants on the show were basically held hostage. It was pretty bad. But I mean, yeah. So there's a lot of emotional. There's much more focus on the emotional dynamic within the pods themselves, and less. And I think for obvious reasons, like as you say. And this is the hilarious thing. Like they keep calling this an experiment, and it's like to me, it's like clearly a failed experiment. Like like yes, there are some marriages that have happened in here, but like the fact that the vast majority, like what's always really funny to me about Love is Blind is that there's this huge contestant pool and you barely see anybody because it obviously just wants to focus in on like the very small few who actually make a connection in these pods. Um, but the whole premise of the show is insane. Um, the idea that because I understand to some degree could you fall in love with somebody without seeing them, but this idea that the metric or like the key performance indicator of a loving connection speaking to another person without seeing them is to propose to them is crazy. It's crazy. And so what I cannot stand about that show, but it's like kind of like a car crash thing, like I can't look away, is like this canned forced um uh simulation of like the commitment that one would actually have to go through to propose to somebody. Like I could imagine sitting in a booth and having a conversation with a stranger, and honestly I can imagine like feeling this like wave of emotional overwhelm, and like I can totally imagine a situation in which I confess my deepest darkest secrets to somebody I can't see. But what's nuts about that show, and my wife and I, when we watch it, we like cringe because it's so unnatural and so forced, is like when they would be like, I love you after like, what if they known each other for like a week and they're telling this person that they're in love with them and
Do you
then
think that do you
proposing
think
to them.
do you think the producers make them say it?
I don't know that they make them say it, but it's definitely they have to say it in order to, obviously, because the whole point is you have to propose in order to see the partner, right? Um, and uh, and then it gets even more ridiculous because then they have these like fake weddings that are like not, you know what I mean? Because even the people actually get married on TV end up having an actual proper ceremony later on. Because the idea, so I don't know if you know this, but like basically if this whole thing where they clearly know what they're going to say at the altar, right? Because there's this like they'll do a religious ceremony, and then the officiant is forced to ask the couple, um, "Is love blind? Like, do you actually take this person, or is this all big lie?" And then of course one of the people will say, "I'm not ready to get married yet," and even that is so traumatizing. And it's so obvious that someone has to literally get in their wedding dress, see their
Yeah.
entire family dressed up on this what was supposed to be this loving occasion, knowing in the back of their head the whole time they're going to jilt their partner at the altar, is
Yeah.
such a cruel thing to force people to do, like on a
Yes.
TV show. And so like that's why when I read this report about the abuse these contestants suffer, it's like, well, of course, like you're basically suing the people in the sense that like you will deny them tens of thousands of dollars unless they go to the very end. You're basically forcing them to like jilt somebody at the altar, somebody they might actually have legitimate feelings for but might not be ready to marry, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
it's just wild. It's such a
Yeah.
crazy show that way.
I didn't think about that part of the show because honestly, the part that I'm interested in the show is usually the part with the pods, and I make it part way through Mexico and I never make it to the end. I just get
Oh
very
no.
bored towards the end. So I usually Google who stayed together just so I know. But I never thought about that, like making people go all the way through the show. And that makes more sense to me why they usually ghost the person at the altar. I'm like, this is crazy that they went all the way through. Why wouldn't they just like write a text message, just like, I can't do it yet. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That makes more sense that the show is coercing them. Um, they talk a lot about that on The Bachelor too, specifically Bachelor in Paradise, where they bring all the Bachelor contestants to fall in love with each other. You know that one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of like producers coercing people to have conversations that they don't want to have. I actually picked up on that on the last season of Love is Blind. There were a few like dramatic situations where the girls weren't getting along, and I could just tell that the producers were like, okay, we're gonna set up a dinner between you two and you're gonna have a conversation with her, because I could just tell it was just like it's not her personality to approach somebody like that. So yeah, there's just like a lot of constructed drama going on, which we always have known about these shows. Um,
Yeah, the worst one is when it's really obvious to me if they when they first meet the families of their prospective partners in Love is Blind, and it's really clear that they've told the family in some way like go to town on this person, right? Like pull them aside, because there's no way that, because I can't imagine uh, that you would just by chance manage to find people with families who are this like brutally rude to their prospective future sons or
yeah,
daughters-in-law. Like they'll ask these like totally inappropriate questions. They'll drag them aside and basically interrogate them like they're in, in an FBI room or something, or like, interviewing for a job. Like it's really insane. Um, but I think the whole like even so I still prefer the dynamic of Love is Blind. As perverse it is, there's always a perverse incentive in trashy online dating shows that the growth of your love interest translates to the chances that you will remain on the show longer. You know what I mean? That your fame will skyrocket higher. And it's such a weird thing because there is no way that anybody is, if their intention truly is fame, which clearly it must be in some cases, there is no way that you are going to translate lasting most or all of a season of one of these shows, like especially Love is Blind, into some sort of future career. And the worst possibility is that the show edits you in a bad light and makes you look like a total deranged asshole, or as you say,
yeah,
narcissist. And then what's worse, if you apply for a job or you're just out in the world and you're like associated with being like, you cheated on your partner, or you were extremely rude to them when you were drunk or something, which I'm sure everyone is at some point. But now it's like it's on TV and it's forever associated with your character. It's like, why would you put yourself at that risk? It's very strange. And not to be insulting to Americans, but I feel like this is a particularly American drive. So it's like I must be on the TV no matter what
Mm.
this is going to do to my psychological health or future financial prospects. Like that is the zenith or the acme of existence, you know.
Well, what I love about Love is Blind is that the people feel real. They feel like they are not social media influencers.
Definitely.
uh I did that because I were like, oh, that's us. I
Yeah.
more and more I feel like a social media influencer, and I don't know how to deal with it emotionally.
Yeah, but we're not people like we're not fame chasers. There's a difference, right? There's social media people
Right.
who are like, I will do
We're
everything in my power to game the algorithm to get
no,
views. And
no,
then
we're
there's people
regular
like us who
people.
are like, I read a book that I liked. I want to talk about it. And like, you know, I'm imitating
we're
myself, by the way, not you.
we're not clickbaity, which I love about us. But
Yeah.
anyway,
And I'm in my
um,
flop era on TikTok anyway. So yeah.
there's periods of time that happens where it's just like a low algorithm month. That happens to everybody. Anyway, um, there's certain shows like The Bachelor. Also Netflix had one called Love Island that was just so clearly this. So they brought in really, really fake people that were just there for fame. And at the beginning of the show, they would show their social media profiles. They would show like their Instagram, like, oh, this is Katie, and it would show her Instagram, and then it would like scroll through her feed, and it was just like very clear that that's what she was there for. So all the Bachelor contestants feel like that to me. Love Island feels like that to me. Bachelor in Paradise feels like that to me. Love is Blind, you get a lot of people that are just like, I'm a geologist, or
Yeah.
like I'm a nurse. It's just like a lot of people, and not to say that certain jobs are better than other jobs, but I'm just like, these people have they have devoted some of their time in their life to something other than being like a social media influencer.
Yeah, I
They
would
have
agree with
like
that.
gradations to their personality. So that's what I like probably the most about Love is Blind, is like there's some real people. Also, I feel like the Love is Blind producers take care to choose people for the dating pool that are not going to be like a huge shock to everybody. So this might be a shallow thing to say, but there are certain people that are like, they have physical attributes that a lot of people wouldn't choose. And I feel like, for example, shortness in men. There's a lot of women who don't want to date a short man, and I don't feel like they have done that. Oh, let's just throw like a man who's like 5'3" into the dating pool and see if someone falls in love with it. Like, I don't
But
feel like they fuck with people.
even me at 5'9", I knew that if like wouldn't matter if I had the closest connection to that show. It doesn't matter. Like if you walk out of
Mm.
that booth and they see a guy who's less than 6 feet tall, they're like, oh fuck, you know. Like it was really funny. Like the one of the contestants from the last season of Love Is Blind came out, and she ended up pairing. It was JP was the guy she paired with, and that was the firefighter with the gap teeth who basically was dead silent the entire time they were dating off after the pods, which was really funny.
I
Actually, it
was gonna
wasn't funny. It was
say
excruciating.
that was sad because it just
Yeah,
felt like she was not physically attracted to him, and it was just sad.
yeah. But I understand. I don't think that was it. I think he was just honestly he sort of gave a slight glimpse. I
Hmm.
think he actually did get legitimately into, like, I think he's a naturally shy person and was actually intimidated by the presence of all these cameras, which was great for me because they're not allowed to break that fourth wall. And he totally broke that fourth wall and said, I was intimidated by the presence of cameramen in the room while we're trying to have this intimate moment. That's not to defend him, obviously. But I remember
Mm-hmm.
talking to my wife, I was like, I probably have less of a connection with this woman, yet I would be able to speak to her more and engage her more than this idiot who's supposed to be her fiance. Like it just drove me crazy. But I thought it was funny. Like uh, she admitted, she's like, well, he's not really the type I would go after, and he's this gap teeth that I'm not into. But the first thought I had when I saw him was, thank God he's tall, and that's what I noticed. Like there is a minimum height standard for people in that show
Yeah.
because you could be the most handsome, beautiful man in the world, but if you're less than 6 feet and you come out and you meet in that hallway, it's like instant devastation, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really sad that there are just kind of things across the board that are not pleasing to people romantically. And I don't know. I've always it's such but it's such a thing between men and women. And there are like a lot of other things that the the shows like bring out for me. And I'm trying to think like obviously Love is Blind doesn't work unless we're doing heterosexual dating. So there's
Yeah.
just like a huge gap in that. Like if it was if you wanted to do any other type of like pansexual dating, you would still have to have two groups of people. So it's like, how do you divide up the groups of people? So I don't know. That show doesn't work unless we're talking about heteronormativity. The thing that I've always noticed about Love is Blind, and maybe this is just like my bias playing into this, really curious to hear what you think. It always just seems to me that you have a bunch of people who are like wildly excited to get married for I have no idea what reason, like 25-year-old women that are just like, it's time, I'm ready. Like that blonde that paired with the firefighter, she was like that. And I was just like, in what where why are you so excited to get married? You don't even know the person. You're excited about the concept of it. That is just wild to me. And the only way that I can process that is like you've grown up in a culture that is steeped in the idea that you're only somebody if you're married, and you can only get on with your life if you're married, and like that has to be a big part of your identity, because I don't see any other reason why. These people have real jobs, these people have incomes, they're not trying to get married for like green cards or anything.
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, I think for that reason, the show definitely attracts more people who view marriage as like this, like, because like everyone in the show, I also feel that there's like a over representation in these shows of people who are career driven, like
Huh.
who just constantly talk about their careers and what they want to do in their careers, and it's important to be financially stable. Like especially Love is Blind, like there's so much focus on wealth and the importance of wealth, and like there's this like deep seated fear that pervades that show, and that obviously came out in one of the storylines between Izzy and I think her name was Stacy, and she was like clearly like entirely focused 100% on like her future financial security. But this is like a recurring theme, not just of Love is Blind but a lot of shows. And I think it's true, and I think that's why. It's because people see marriage as a economic arrangement, a preferable economic arrangement that they need to sort out sooner than later, because they're at the stage where I can't afford to wait to have kids later, for this or that
Mm.
reason, or I can't afford to enter this union later. And I also think it's like this perverse, unconscious, like Protestant yearning for arranged marriage. You know what I mean? Like where I lack the ability, like I just need something external to force me into this commitment that I can't
Huh.
sort out on my own, right? That I
Hmm.
can't emotionally find the wherewithal to figure out how to make on my own, right? And I think Temptation Island is a lot like that too.
Mm.
um the Ultimatum is obviously like that. It's a huge, like I always find it really hilarious on the Ultimatum when they interview a couple, and it's like the man or the woman will be like, it's time. We've been at this for so long. And then you find out they've just been dating for 2 years. And I'm like, and you're worried. And they're like literally in their mid 20s. And I'm like, you guys have
Hmm.
time. You have time. Like, but yeah, there's this fear, this like that they're gonna die any minute and they have to get this arrangement done or else. Yeah, it's again, like that's the problem. And this is always a problem with media, is that because of the nature of reality shows, it's like self-selects this very specific type of person, just beyond heteronormative beauty standards, and economic standards. It attracts, as you say, like there's obviously a higher chance for like narcissistic people to be on the show, because if you're even contemplating being in a romantic relationship on camera for many millions of people to see, there's a bit of a exhibitionist elements to your personality already, right?
Hmm.
And so I just always think it's interesting because if we can't pretend as if these shows aren't having a knock-on effect in terms of people's expectations of relationships in real life. And that sounds really patronizing, but it's absolutely true. Like I feel like a lot of our understanding of dating and like the values, like a lot of the movements you see now in dating circles about how, the whole sprinkle thing with like women being like, I'm only in this to like be financially secure and I won't do
Mm.
50-50, and like this very like staunch, like under the guise of feminism, but this staunch like economically based understanding of relationships. Like I feel like our reality TV archetypes absolutely play into this, right? So so yeah, I don't know. It's weird, but yeah, these shows definitely attract a certain type.
Sorry, I'm chewing.
I know you're chewing. I was also going to mention I totally forgot about. See, this is my other problem is with these shows, is I watch them and then immediately forget them. Like they go in one ear and out the other, and half the time I'm on my phone like reading about other things, which is actually why I like them because they're very like non-committal. Like you can send work emails while they're on in the background if you need to. It's like it's great.
Very good on in the background energy with these shows.
Yeah.
Some of them they have so much content. They produce like 4 hours of content per week
It's
on
crazy
Bachelor
how
in
long they are.
Paradise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say too hot to handle on Netflix. And I like that show too. And I don't think that would be a classic dating show, but I like the show because it really leans into the narcissistic element of reality TV, which I kind of feel
mm,
you have to do at some element, like at some point. Like you can't pretend that these people magically showed up on a TV show because they wanted to find love. Like, you know what I mean? Whereas like in
yeah.
that show, it's patently obvious they're on TV to look hot, to like bump up their Instagram numbers and to have sex with hot partners, and that's it. You
Hmm.
know, like I'm like, all right, that makes sense to me as like a motivating factor for a real narcissist. Yeah.
Yeah, that show. I don't think she was a narcissist, but she was on The Perfect Match and she came from Too Hot to Handle. Can't
Oh,
even remember
okay.
her name. But
Crossover.
she had a very that's what The Perfect Match is. They bring everybody from different shows. They brought Bartice from Love is Blind, they brought some people
Oh,
over from The Mole, and then they make a dating show out of it, out of all the other reality shows. So check it
that's a
out, Perfect
very
Match.
smart format. I don't even know where that
Yes.
would air up here. I'll figure that out.
Netflix.
It's on Netflix?
Yeah, Perfect Match.
Oh,
Yeah, write it
okay.
down.
I'll get it
Um,
out. Yeah.
What was the, you said so many things that I wanted to bring up while you were saying that, but I guess just on the line of thinking of like, these are people who have a very specific idea about what love and partnership is. And I've always noticed specifically the women just saying, oh my gosh, he's my best friend. I can imagine spending every day with him. And there's just like there's something projected onto relationships that is very fantasy based that
Well,
and I feel like I've suffered from it myself in my life of like believing that relationships were one thing. And the most recent person I dated, I've made TikTok videos about this, just like literally tried to be my friend. I was just interested in being my friend, felt very similar to the way that women tried to be friends with me. And I was like, oh my God, is all relationships all relationships are friendships? That's that I had no idea because
yeah.
I've always felt like romantic relationships went in this specific direction and they became very weighty, very fast. And I always felt like I couldn't be myself. And then there were all these like societal expectations about how things were going to go and like having to be affectionate in a certain way. And I was just like, oh, wait a second. I think that relationships are just like you have a friend and then you start to love them and then you spend more time with them. And it's like a very natural feeling. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I don't I the whole like she's not just my partner, she's my best friend. Like I don't know if I always think that's universally the case. Like yes, my wife is but it's like it's so weird to call my wife my friend. Like she's my friend, but like you know what I mean? Like you know, it's hard I'm not doing this any justice to describe it, but like there are conversations you have with a romantic lifelong partner that you just don't have with your friends. And that's I
mhm,
don't think that's a male female thing or like a gay straight thing. I just think
mhm.
there's like a certain level of familiarity you have with your friends that is different when you're in a committed relationship with a partner because the stakes of your relationship are much higher. So I think what people are trying to convey is like you can't fuel a long-term relationship on the romantic feelings of the opening stage alone, which is
Yeah,
like
right.
everyone knows at this stage, right? Like it's the difference between erotic love and
Yes.
agape or whatever, right?
Yeah,
So I think
it's
people,
erotic love and companionate love. Companionate
yeah,
love is the long-term love.
yeah, but I think those are still two sides of like a relationship, a romantic relationship coin.
Mhm.
And I don't think those are the same as friendship, but that's fine. I understand what people say when they broadly use that metaphor. What I wanted to say about the reality show thing is like, yes, that's what they usually judge how well the relationship is going. It's like, he's so easy to talk to. I can say anything to them. But I think what they're misunderstanding and like what's hilarious about how unreflective or unself-reflective the contestants are, and I realize they're not contesting, but you know what I mean, the stars on especially Love Is Blind are, is that they completely ignore the idea of like the summer romance, like the situation where you're in a very specific removed context with somebody and you're sharing an extremely unique and bizarre experience with them that's very intense. um, I mean, it's not just that you're meeting this person for the first time. You are both in a context that is extremely strange for both of you because you are in the situation where you're having a conversation with another person. You're both being filmed. You're living in these weird quarters. There's an expectation that should you have a like that we want you to have a connection here, that you're looking for a connection here. And not only that, if you make a connection here, you can be part of the show and be on TV and be famous. And so all of these things are like clouding everyone's judgment. And of course, like what a surprise that immediately and like 9 times out of 10, they'll finish the show and they'll not be in a relationship anymore. Even if they're committed at the altar at the last scene, they'll be like, it's always really funny to me. Like, yes, we said yes, but 2 weeks later we realized it wasn't working. And so we, you know what I mean? Like it's
Mhm.
like constant. And so like, it's just so funny to me that people pretend like grown adults who understand things about the world to like lie to themselves in this process to like convince themselves. um and it's always like the family members are the only ones being like, do you realize how insanely stupid this is, and they're not listening, like, yeah.
Mhm.
Anyway, it's wild.
I understand that completely about lying to yourself. Maybe the ability to lie to yourself is the difference between your successful relationship and my many unsuccessful relationships. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe
Um,
that's it's probably more universal than I'm giving it credit for, but
I have a question for you. So I I think that we are sold lines by society about what relationships are. For women, it is you are waiting for your knight in shining armor to come and scoop you up. You are the damsel, you are the princess. And he is going to come and protect you and make you feel safe and loved and provide for you, right? And then we are constantly frustrated when men don't show up like that. Um, I'm curious what you think men are told about women in the same, like, are men told a fairy tale like women are told?
I think, I mean, my experience, I can't speak for all men. Not all men. No, I don't. I'm just kidding. But no, in my own personal experience, no, there's literally no culture. Like that is that like the whole marriage thing, relationship thing was almost never spoken about. Was there was no sense of like cultural, like I think at one point when I was a teenager, yes, the narrative was like losing your virginity and like all
Hmm.
that, like that was hyper focused. But then after that, it was like you meet someone you like, you have a nice relationship, maybe you settle down and have kids. Like that's it. There's no like, I don't
Hmm.
think there's a set expectation of like that this is an important part of your life. You know what I mean? But again,
Hmm.
this is my own personal experience.
Do
And
you think
yeah,
that you were given anything about like, oh, the woman is gonna like take care of your house and clean things up and like no, because it seems like
not my yeah.
men do expect that.
I think men of a certain stripe expect it, and so this is why I think my cultural experience is not universal because I'm always shocked to discover that there are these men who like have a very clear understanding of how households are supposed to work. Now, to be fair to these reality shows, it's actually interesting to me that this doesn't come up more often. Like, yes, you'll see men who live in their apartments by themselves and they look like bachelor apartments, like one piece of furniture in the middle of a barren room. Like, I think that's really funny that keeps coming up. But in terms of like, I'm actually shocked there isn't more of that in these shows where like the men have conversations with their prospective partners and say, look, I come from a traditional background. My expectation is that you're going to be taking care of things at home, and I actually think this is a cultural shift in general, and I suspect this has been happening for a while, where these like patriarchal modes of understanding of marriage and relationships is kind of dissolving a little bit, but it's not the results of that are not always good, because now I feel, because I think while men have been disabused of this idea in some ways, they're still coddled in when they grow up, and a lot of men aren't expected to take charge in terms of like expected to do household chores the same way that girls are, because there's still these sexist heteronormative ideas about household work. And so now I remember I saw this TikTok from this divorce lawyer who was talking about, she sees how she's seeing way more cases
I see her. I
of,
love her.
yeah, where she says she sees cases now of men who not only expect their wives to be caregivers for the children, to be housekeepers more or less, to clean the house, to prepare all the meals, which is wild to me. Like three of those things, those expectations alone is insane. But then now they increasingly expect them to be, if not co-income earners, major income earners in the household, under the guise of, women are now expected to be part of the workforce, so you have to pull your weight and get a job, which is crazy to me. So like no wonder like women are now sort of like being ruthless when it comes to relationships, because if you're now dealing with men who have these extremely sexist expectations of relationships, and I don't think they're based necessarily in these like religious patriarchal ideas. I think honestly they're just because they've never known a life any other way. They've never known a life where they're not having someone pick up after themselves, or they're not having someone drive them to school, or they're not having someone pay all their expenses. They're just used to living this way. And so when they get out into the world and they sort of get with a partner, and they get in this gross sort of pseudo Freudian parental relationship with a prospective partner, where they expect their partner to be something of like a mothering figure. And a lot of men, I think, are up with, and I don't want to put this on women at all. This is not fair to women, but I think it's just, there's this unconscious sexist ideals that happen in households. And there's just this thing where boys have less of an expectation to do these things than girls. And so men just enter and they're like, what's the problem? I'm like a good guy. And they think to themselves, I'm a good guy. I say all the right things. Like I believe in all the right things. I believe in feminism. Like, but at the same time, they're never doing any household chores. They're never like helping their kids with their homework. They're never cooking any meals, like where they're just tapping out of, yeah.
All of that is just upbringing stuff, and it starts from the very beginning. It's very cultural and societal. Just boys are not as expected to know how to clean shit up, know how to find shit. Just like it's from the very beginning, and it's very much just like how people are raised. And then when they're adults, it's the same thing that we do to men. We kind of flip on them. We're like, be tough and unemotional, and then be the complete opposite of that in your romantic relationship. They're like, I don't have skills for that.
Yeah, like I don't know how, like, yeah.
It's there's a whole rabbit hole we could go down to. I feel like the episode would be named domestic work. But yeah, it's just fascinating to me that and I've heard that from other men, just like, oh yeah, we're not really told any fantasy. So I stand back and I go, okay, so women have to get told a story in order for us to be interested in like marriage, really. I think we're interested in men, in having relationships with men. Men don't have to be told a story. They're naturally interested in this institution. That's just kind of interesting to me. And I live with 5 adult femme presenting people. Some of the people in our house are non-binary, but all of us were born women, and we all grew up with the societal expectation to clean up after ourselves, etc. And it is wonderful to live with these people. And I've lived only with pretty much men in serious relationships, and I'm like, oh my God, like I just want to live with adult women. Like every I feel like married woman says that, like, I just want to move in with all my girlfriends and we can just have a house together. So I actually did that. So I'll let you know in a few years how it's going. But
Well, you should
that
definitely watch Love is Blind Queer Edition, because there are some issues that come up between the partners that are over cleanliness. So it's it may not be universally
you
you
mean the
know
ultimatum?
yeah, the ultimatum,
Yeah, yeah.
sorry. Yeah, no, it's, I think, again, I don't want to stereotype because I don't honestly know, but I think a lot of it is like, for women, it seems like marriage is fully understood as an institution, like as like
Mm.
a thing that is agreed upon, and it carries with it certain responsibilities. Whereas I think men see marriage as a sort of natural outcome of like being in a loving long-term relationship with a
Hmm.
partner when they don't want to see anyone else. And those sound similar, but they're not quite the same things. And coming back to our topic of conversation, like if you think of, I think her name was Stacy and Izzy. Izzy, like it was really interesting because they were really compatible partnership. They clearly were into each other. They clearly had really good chemistry. But here is this person, Stacy, who is like very financially minded, who's like owns her own home, who fully understands finances, and then you get this 30-year-old man who looks upright by all, for all intents and purposes, but is like has bad credit rating and is like, has trouble with finances and is very tenuous. And it's clear that this is a huge concern for uh, his potential future partner, his fiance, and
And
he's still.
his past
Oh, sorry.
love interest said the same thing. Johnny
Yeah,
was like, I heard that he had bad credit, so she's
yeah,
like, he can go.
yeah. He's a, and it's like, and I think a lot of men feel hurt by this, right? Because in their minds,
Mm.
they're like, well, what would it matter? Things can change, right? Like we can get in a relationship, and my employment prospects can improve, and but love is something that lasts forever. And I think women are much, not all women, but I think some women have a much more sort of grounded, realistic understanding of like what a partnership like that actually involves.
Yes.
Not, again, not all of them, but it was just really interesting in that case. I think men have this very naive sense of like, love conquers all, love is the most important thing, and all the other stuff we can figure out down the line. But it's, I think women are just naturally and understandably concerned about entering a long-term relationship with a partner who's chronically unable to pay the bills.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was like, what direction do I want to go in? Yeah, so it sounds like,
Maybe we should talk about the fact that so many smart people that I know who are like really into books and really into like, they have this as their vice, right? Like
oh my God. Yes.
my friend Brian Phillips, he was, I don't think he watched dating shows as much, but he was obsessed with like, and he's like one of the most brilliant writers I've ever met. Like this guy is just such a beautiful, intelligent person, and he's like really into like Japanese reality shows. Like, and I go to work, like the people I work with are super smart, right? Like I think my coworker, one of them is like an award-winning poet, the other's a PhD, and we both traded like tips on good dating reality shows to watch, right? So it seems to me there's this like, not to say that, and not like, of course everyone's interested in these shows, but I just find that the fact that we sort of shy away from discussing its universal appeal out of shame is very silly.
I
Because you can,
think
yeah,
I think people who have a lot of nuance, who have a lot of interest in psychology and emotional dynamics, are attracted to these shows. My friend Sarah, who's extremely smart, also Aubrey Gordon, who is a very, very smart podcaster and someone that I follow. She's like super into The Bachelor. Another one, comedian Jessie Klein, who I highly respect for her intelligence, also very into these things. It's a thing with smart
yeah,
people. It's like, why?
yeah. What's going on there? I also think it's because these shows are such a Rorschach for like, for what people are generally thinking about relationships, and what their
Societal expectations.
yeah, totally, like, and also like I find elements of the show really really interesting and bizarre, like the fact that Nick Leahy and what's her face,
Lachey, yeah.
Yeah,
And Vanessa.
Vanessa, yeah, yeah. And the guy who hosts, Mark Wahlberg or whatever hosts, Temptation Island, is the same. They act as these pseudo sort of counselors or priests. Like they have this like bizarre, and that's the other thing I find fascinating about these shows, is the bizarre morality that's used to justify them. Um, like Temptation Island would always have this element where they force the they force the couples or they isolate the couples, and then they force them to watch what their partners are doing with other people on the other side of the island, and there's no context given. It's just one edit taken completely out of context. And like it's what I find always funny is like the justification that the host uses, like that this is like important for them to see and they should see it. And it's like, you know what I mean, like stuff that no one would say in the real world, but because of the bizarre rules of reality TV, that's like they invent their own perverse morality. It's like it's so interesting to me.
Speaking of morality, have you seen any of The Golden Bachelor?
No, but I heard that's excellent. I heard it's like better than any other Bachelor iteration ever.
It
Because
is it is so cute. The it's the Bachelor that they chose. He's like sweet Midwestern vibes. He like is very good. I don't know if he's like practiced mindfulness in his life or what, but he's like very like, hello, I'm focused on you. You're everything right now. Like he's so good with that, and he's so
oh, cool.
sweet. And all the women are very nice to each other. It's kind of fallen off. Like there was a little drama last week. But in general, most of the women are just like, I think Nancy is a great person for Jerry, and I hope that like we all get our chance to show our full personalities. And they're just like very, I don't know, just people have been through a lot in life. A lot of them, their husbands have died, you know, and these ladies look great too. Like some of them, I'm like, God, this lady seems like she's in her 40s and she's in her 60s. So I don't know. They don't look fake either. Like sometimes on The Bachelor, people can look really like they've had a lot of surgery and stuff. But I don't know. It's just very wholesome. And I don't know. Every week that we watch it, because we watch it on Thursdays here in the house with all the roommates, and it's a thing. We just like, oh, Jerry, we love you.
I haven't seen it, but I could totally imagine there being like a take it or leave it vibe. Like these women are, you know, they've lived a long life. They're not like necessarily like desperate to find a partner at the moment. So it's probably for them like just as much about connecting with these other women and like the experience of being on this TV
Yeah.
show, and like, you know what I mean? Like I'm sure it's like it's interesting too, because I have this thing about reality TV in general where it's clear that producers have this idea that like drama between contestants is what makes the show interesting. And I can't stand this, because it's not always true, right? Like you can actually have a reality show that's really compelling when all the sort of primary characters are generally in sync with one another and doing cool things. And like I think of my does not count under the realm of dating shows, so we can't talk about it, but it is my favorite. There is dating on it, but it's my favorite reality show of all time is
What
Below
is it?
Deck. Below Deck.
What
Below
is
Deck is
that?
like, oh, you don't know that show? Oh my God.
No.
So Below Deck is a massive series of like there's all these spin-offs, and it's about people who work on yachts. And it's a very upstairs downstairs thing because they feature like the yacht crew and the yacht crew relationship and how they
Is
all
this
get
like
to know
the
each
real
other.
world, but on a boat?
Yeah, it's like but it's very work oriented. Like they're supposed to be
Hmm.
serious. Like there's like stewards for the passengers, and then there's you know, the deckhands and all that sort of stuff, and the captain, and has to sort of babysit them all. And there's all sorts of infighting between the crew, but then there's also this relationship with these very, in some cases very wealthy and very sort of chauvinistic and awful guests
Hmm.
that they have to sort of cater to their every need. Anyway, it's like it's perfect. It's like got the perfect element. But the thing is with that show is the best seasons and the most entertaining seasons are when the crew loves each other and gets along and does really, really well.
Mm.
And I feel like it's like a really good example of like this mistaken idea that you need people fighting all the time to make a show compelling, and at some point it becomes actually exhausting to the viewer to watch. And because I think like sometimes with the dating shows like Love Is Blind, it's just as interesting when you see a couple overcome obstacles, not necessarily between fighting with one another, but overcome external obstacles to sort of get together. And that's happened once or twice. Like I would argue, like Milton and Lydia on the last season of Love Is Blind. So you haven't seen it. It's Milton is this 24-year-old like scientist. I can't remember. He's not a geologist because that's Lydia, but similar work or whatever. And
Can you
his
can
partner
you
is
hold
this like
on? Can you
Oh
hold on a
yeah,
second? I think the
yeah.
internet installation guy might be here.
No, okay, fun times. That's cool.
Continue as if nothing happened. Milton.
Yeah, so Milton is this 24-year-old nerd, and then his partner is like this 30-year-old geologist or whatever. A very
I
bizarre
relate
couple.
to
She's
I relate to Lydia so much, by the way.
Yeah, and
Anyway.
she's this feisty Puerto Rican, and he's this sort of
Mm-hmm.
demure but extremely thoughtful and wise beyond his years man. And I just thought, yes, they had that big fight in the restaurant or whatever, but for the most part, they had this like great relationship. And it was really all this stuff swirling around them, with Lydia's former relationship with this guy who's it seemed like a real nasty piece of work, that guy Uche or whatever. And to me, that was like kind of one of the more, because you want them to get together, right? Like you don't want to see a couple fight the whole time and then have a messy breakup. Like sometimes that can be entertaining, but like if you think of, like, for example, the firefighter who literally didn't say a word, those scenes were excruciating. Like I wanted to fast forward through them because I was like, this guy
Mm-hmm.
is such a bag of potatoes. Like, so I just sometimes wish that the shows would like shy away from like forcing this fake drama in our face and just like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Anyway, maybe I'm not a reality TV producer, so I'm sure they can show me like on the ratings where it goes up, and I'm sure
Yeah,
there is a
the
contingent.
two things. That relationship between Lydia and Milton, like my assessment of Lydia is just like she is truly a good person. She has a lot of depth to her. When I watch her be in relationship with the women, like she is a good friend. And I don't think she has any idea like what she wants and probably very little self-worth because just I didn't see any potential in that relationship when they were first talking. I was just like, Milton? That's random. And then she was immediately just like, oh my God, I love you so much. I'm like, Lydia, you don't believe that. Like, come
Yeah, like
on.
when she was clawing the screen that separated them in the pods and being like, I just want to touch you and hold you. I'm like,
No, I
whoa.
was like, this is from your fantasy. I don't know if it's like from your id ego somewhere of just like what you want a relationship to be. So I was just like, I feel like you just pulled Milton out of nowhere because it didn't work with Izzy. Like you really wanted Izzy anyway. But I was just like, I relate with her so much about like not knowing really how to feel loved in a relationship, not really because it showed the proposal part where he was just like it was basically just like, will you marry me? And then on his side he's just like oh
Yeah.
god, and she's just like yes, and he's
Yeah.
just like oh okay.
Yeah.
So that was so awkward to me, but I have felt like her in relationships, just like I don't know what the frick I want, I guess I'm just going to choose this person.
Yeah. Well,
So that
there is a thing that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I don't remember what I was going to say, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say there is this thing that I really believe that sometimes I see in these shows, which is that like people who are not ultimately compatible, who don't always have the best conversations, who aren't like the best friends that we constantly hear about, at least couples are supposed to be, they just work through it. You know what I mean? Like they're just like they will commit to loving this person, even though they might not have the most like, and that's what I like. There's such an obsession in our culture with chemistry, right? And I always find it interesting, like in not in reality TV dating shows, but the dating shows where we see them go on a date and they're like, I didn't have a connection with this person, and that's it. We had no chemistry. And there's this like there's this like hyper focus on this immediate chemistry you're supposed to feel with another person, and the reality is in relationships sometimes that's like that doesn't come until later and for totally different reasons, and you have to sometimes work at that and like so there is a part of me that deep down understands why like things like arranged marriages often work out very well. I mean, often they end up disastrously, but there are many cases where people are like in a really arranged marriage and they love each other super deeply, and they might not even have the most immediately compatible relationship. So there is something to like, you just make it work if you want to make it work.
And there are people who are more well oriented towards relationships because of that aspect of them, because they're just able to choose something and go along with it. I've never been able to understand that in people because I'm just like, hey, if something's not resonating with me today, I'm not going to like it. I can't choose it. There's just not a part of me that can be like that, really. And I've assumed that that's the reason why some people are able to stay in relationships and not others. Yeah, there's a couple of things swirling around in my mind that I just can't remember. I can't remember the second thing I was going to say about Lydia and Milton, except that I just think Lydia seemed like a really great person. Um,
There's a lot of people who don't like her. Like, there's a huge online contingent of people who thought that she had sort of was holding Milton hostage somehow. And I'm like, Milton is a very
mm,
smart, very self-aware man. At least he appears to be. Like, who knows? Maybe it's just words, but I feel like he would know pretty well if things weren't working out that way. I mean, you can only glean so much from the few scenes that you see these people on these shows, but
yeah,
um
and they can edit them however they
anyway,
want to.
exactly. That's why they use on all those reality shows, especially the Netflix ones. That's why they use those how they're all drinking out of like silver goblets and stuff all the time.
Hmm.
Like they don't
Yeah,
drink out of uh, glassware or whatever, or transparent glassware. And the whole reason is because they edit. And
they
so
edited out
if
of order.
yeah, so you will notice obviously if someone's like tall glass of wine goes like this and like this, like throughout their conversation, you're gonna be like, what the fuck is happening? Like
I
I'm being
remember
silly.
I remember what I was gonna say. I remember hearing a reality show producer, I don't know if they had a TikTok account or what it was, but she was like, you know what we do? We wake them up early in the morning and we don't let them go to bed. And we just fill them full of alcohol. Just there's alcohol everywhere. We are mistreating these people. Like they do not get to rest. Like there's a lot of mistreatment going on.
Below deck actually is very similar and has come under fire for the same reason because
Mm,
these crews get like every time they finish a charter they go out and just get destroyed, like really gross drunk. And I'm increasingly getting uncomfortable watching the show for that reason because I'm like,
mm,
this is a recipe for very terrible things to happen, and they almost have at least a few times on that show. So
I can't wait until reality show producers figure out that the viewer wants to watch something with a lot of depth and a lot of dynamics, and it doesn't have to be drama. Like one of my biggest complaints about these dating shows is the people they choose don't have a lot of depth to their personality. They're not real people like us. I feel like they're unusually shallow people. And maybe it's hard to cast interesting, multifaceted people for these shows, but like the average person with a TikTok account, I really enjoy listening to them talk. And I don't, when they're interviewing someone on a dating show, I'm just like, this is like 1 inch deep, these like spiritual awakenings that you're having. Anyway.
yeah, I have to say, like, people on these shows are universally shallow, like shallow, shallow, shallow. Like if you didn't know anything about human society except through reality TV, like Lord help you if that's the case, you would think like the worst of us because yeah, they tend to pick extremely like, and people who for whom everything seems like a novelty, like there's like everything is like an inch
Mm.
thick and like a mile wide or whatever. Like I don't know, it's just yeah, as you say, like they have a new relationship and it's like everything is a revelation to them and it's just like really shallow. It's like boring, you know.
So they need to figure out that they don't have to have drama. They just have to have deep, interesting relationships. They figured that out with regular ass shows, with regular scripted shows. I'm sure they'll figure it out.
Yeah, like that's a weird thing. This idea that we want the reality shows to be trashy, but like there's clearly an appetite. Like
Well, I feel like
have you
it's just the history. It's literally the history of reality shows that is
right. It's
having an
like the
effect on
norm.
this. What were our first reality shows? It was like Nick and Jessica at home,
Right.
Nick Lachey. And if you go back and watch those, because one of my favorite podcasts went and did some rewatching of Nick and Jessica, the Newlyweds show, and they were like, it is almost unwatchable. They did not know how to edit this show. And so like it was that, and then it was like the Kardashians, and like our first reality shows were very shallow like that. And I feel like it's going to take a while to get away from that culture. There's
But it
also
is it well, sorry, go ahead.
I miss the 2000 2001 era of uh like concept reality shows where it's like The Amazing Race, Survivor, and they still have them, but they don't have them like they had them back then. It was like a golden age. Netflix rebooted The Mole, and they're coming back with another season, which I'm really excited about because it's another game. I like those ones a lot better than any of these like crappy celebrity reality shows. And I love that our culture is going away from like celebrity voyeurism, where we actually see people just outwardly being rich as kind of disgusting and not something that we want to watch. I love that trend.
Yeah, the de-dramification of reality shows would be good because like even Love is Blind, the most boring scenes to me are the ones where they all meet up for drinks and inevitably there's fights like and totally over bullshit. And it's like those are the scenes where I'm just like we can fast forward. Like they're just utterly uninteresting to me and not why I would watch the show. But clearly some producers like gin them up, get them drunk. Like we got to get some drama in here. Like yeah, exactly. It would be nice. It would be nice to see something new and different in this genre.
Yes. Very good.
Yeah.
I think we're done.
Well, that was fun. I needed to get
Yeah.
all of that out of my system.
I just realized we should have changed our names because I think it's going to be harder for me to crop out our names in this
Gosh.
orientation. But I'll just put a little box over it. But
All right.
it takes forever in the video editing to do that for whatever reason. But anyway,
I'm
I'll
really
do it.
sorry. Damn
Next
it.
time we'll change our names and then we'll be
Yeah.
fine. Also, you said in a TikTok video recently, you're like, you'll never see a picture of my wife, so you'll never know, but my wife is gorgeous, or it's like something like that. So I definitely want to see a picture of your wife at some point.
I can make that
Invited.
possible. You're a friend. You're friends and colleagues. I'll send you something.
Yes, very
Yeah.
good. Well, nice to talk to you, sir.
You
I
too.
will
Be
talk to you
well.
again. Be
All
well.
right.
Enjoy the new list of shows that I have told you about, and I will be watching Below Deck.
Yeah. So what's the Netflix one you said again? Match.
Perfect match.
Perfect match. Got it. Okay. I'll check it out.
Yeah. Alrighty.
Ciao.
Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.